I recently got back from a month of fieldwork in the outback, and Australia happens to be the flattest continent on Earth. Its highest peak, Mount Kosciuszko, is only 2,228 meters tall. This map here is 1 to 10,000 scale, so one block represents about 10 kilometers, which would make Kosciuszko only about 0.2 blocks tall. At this scale, even Mount Everest wouldn't be a full block tall. The world is actually quite flat. No, not like that. But this did get me thinking about the scale of terrain in Minecraft. I don't think it will be a surprise to anyone that the topography in Minecraft is reduced from things in real life, and that many games compress scale. This is the map for Ghost of Tsushima, a great open world game that was released in 2020. The game map is about 28 square kilometers, but the titular island is a real island. Tsushima in real life is a little over 700 square kilometers. If you didn't scale things, most of the map would feel empty or repetitive, and add a lot of development time. This isn't just something that's done in handcrafted landscapes. Procedurally created games do this as well. No Man's Sky has full planets you can explore, but they are actually quite small. Saturn's moon Mimas is the smallest spherical body in our solar system, but the largest planets in No Man's Sky are about 20 times smaller than that. Even at this reduced scale, you aren't meant to fully explore them. They're basically just a single biome with repetitive topography. For Minecraft, even though the build limit is 320, the maximum height that topography can generate is 255 meters. Compared to real life, that's almost a tenth the size of Australia's tallest mountain. And that's fine. I don't necessarily think that Minecraft would benefit from topography matching real life, but I was curious what some real life mountains would look like. We're going to take this with us. In northern Wisconsin, there's a landform called Rib Mountain. It's composed of some very durable 2 billion year old quartzite, which allowed it to resist weathering and multiple glaciations that flattened out the surrounding topography. It's a local high point, about 226 meters higher than the surrounding area, which is almost as high as the highest possible mountains in Minecraft. But personally, it's hard to consider it an actual mountain. Loaded into Minecraft at 1:1 scale, it doesn't give me mountain vibes either. The slope of the hill is too shallow, so the base is very wide, and even though you are up high, it really doesn't seem like it. Our Minecraft mountain does a much better job looking like a mountain in a much smaller area because it has these steep sides. Before we go on to some actual mountain-looking mountains, let's talk about what a mountain is. The term mountain can be a bit subjective. The Oxford definition is a natural elevation of the Earth's surface rising more or less abruptly from the surrounding level and attaining an altitude which, relative to adjacent elevation, is impressive or notable. Nothing defines how fast abruptly is or how high it needs to be. There are multiple ways to define height as well, and these will come up again, so let's talk about that for a bit. The most common method is just to measure the distance from the peak down to the mean sea level. For our peak here, that's 149 meters. When you hear elevation, this is normally the way it's measured. But another way is by measuring from the center of the planet. This is a map of Earth made by C.M. Patrick. It's about 1 to 33,000 scale. The stratovolcano Chimborazo in Ecuador is 6,263 meters tall. And on the other side of the world, Mount Everest is about 2,500 meters taller than that, at about 8,848 meters tall. But the Earth is not a perfect sphere. Due to Earth's spin, it actually bulges out at the equator, and it's an oblate spheroid, like an M&M. The model is conveniently hollow, so we can go inside and still see the surface. The polar diameter is 12,714 kilometers, but the equatorial diameter is 12,756, about 42 more. Measured from the core, Chimborazo's peak is 6,384.4 kilometers, which is a few more than Everest's 6,382.3 kilometers. Technically making it the farthest point from Earth's center. Not that useful, but I had to cover it. The last way is prominence, or relative height. Let's go back to the other world. Prominence is defined as the distance from a summit to the lowest contour line encircling it, but containing no other higher summit within it. A visual way to do this is think about the peak as an island surrounded by water. The water is entirely surrounding it, and there are no other peaks on the island. So let's lower the water until it connects to another peak. This little peak is now part of the island, but it's shorter than when we started with. So this little peak has a prominence of only 3 blocks. For the main peak, we'll keep lowering the water until the island has a higher peak. At Y91, we get a land bridge that connects this peak to that higher one over there. We measure the elevation between the peak and our imaginary water level, and that's the prominence, so 121 meters. and this is the one that we will be using the most. Okay, let's get back to some real mountains. To have taller mountains, we can create a custom dimension with a maximum build height of 2048. With that in mind, I tried to find something more mountainous, and I decided to use the Tetons in Wyoming for 2 reasons. Its tallest peak, Grand Teton, has a prominence of nearly 2,000 meters. And secondly, they are visually distinct because, unlike many mountains, they lack foothills on one side. They go from plains to peaks in a short distance, and are commonly used in commercials and films because of this. We can load them into the game at 1:1 scale and see how they look. They definitely look like mountains, but that abrupt rise from plains to peak still takes 6 kilometers, which is 6,000 blocks. If I just ran that distance in game, it would take about 18 minutes, if it was a straight line, which it isn't. So I decided to actually see how long it would take me to run from here up to the peak of Grand Teton. Turns out it's 35 minutes. Still a bit quicker than I could do it in real life. The view from the top is actually quite stunning. To put things more into scale, there's our Minecraft mountains down there. I'll put my wingsuit on and head back down. And then we can talk about why these mountains look this way. Most mountains have foothills, a gradual increase in elevation with multiple smaller peaks as you get closer to the main ridge of mountains. The Tetons are different because they are a type of mountain called fault block mountains. These represent 2 blocks of Earth's crust, and there is a fault between them represented in white. Tectonic forces have moved the left block up and the right block down relative to each other, as well as inclined them a bit, and this formed the Tetons on the left and a basin on the right. The mountains have and are still eroding and filling this basin with sediment, forming these flat plains out in front of them. In our model, you can actually see some lobes of sediment that have fallen down the mountain. There's very broadly 3 other types of mountains. Dome, that I talked a little bit about in one of my older videos, igneous rocks. And then the other 2 we'll talk about in this episode. And before we move on, I want to touch on how I'm getting the topography into the game, because it'll be important for the rest of the mountains. As an Earth scientist, I often use geospatial data. One of these data types is DEMs, or digital elevation models. They are basically an image that contains elevation data instead of color data. Many government agencies make this data available. In the US, there is the USGS, and that's where I got the Teton data. This is what the DEM data looks like in QGIS, an open source graphic information system. And you can do things like hill shaded relief or color code them and do lots of other math on them. To get them into the game, the program World Painter can take these files as height maps, and then that exports to a Minecraft world. To look at some bigger mountains, we're going to need to make some adjustments. We can't make the build height any bigger, not that my PC could deal with that, but more importantly, to have a 1:1 scale map in Minecraft, I need 1 meter resolution elevation data, and that's just not available for everywhere on Earth. Luckily, the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency has 30 meter resolution available for the entire planet. So we will start with scaling things down. We can lower the resolution of the Tetons down to 1/30th. They actually still look pretty good at this scale, and it makes me want to see the entire Earth like this. That would only be about 400,000 blocks across at the equator. We also need to scale down our Minecraft mountain, but each block is still equal to 1 meter, compared to the normal blocks representing 30 meters each. Let's look at our next mountain type, a stratovolcano. I'm standing on Mount Hood in Oregon. It has a prominence of 2,349 meters, a little higher than Grand Teton, and it has this distinctive shape that most people think of for a volcano. It's part of the Ring of Fire, and it's still considered active, even if it hasn't erupted since the 1800s. Mount Hood is primarily composed of andesite. The lava that it comes from has a high viscosity, and this causes it to form steep sides, pointy peaks, and why these volcanoes are called stratovolcanoes. Volcanoes are something that I always hear people wanting to get added into Minecraft, and we sort of have these inactive ones already. It's common for Minecraft mountains to now have these middle, lower sections that reminds me of a volcanic caldera. It would be cool if they had a special biome that had a big lava pool in the middle or something. I did this mock-up here with basalt, which isn't correct for the volcano type, but it looks good, and basalt volcanoes will come up later. This was a jungle that I just painted over, and I forgot about the ferns, but actually they work. Ferns are usually some of the first plants that move back in after eruptions and other catastrophic events. Like the Tetons, volcanoes don't have foothills either, but stratovolcanoes are usually part of bigger mountain ranges made up of other volcanoes. Mount Hood is part of the Cascades, and the process that makes the lava for these volcanoes is the same process that makes our next mountain, plate tectonics. I'm standing in the plains south of the Himalayan foothills. That's the peak of Mount Everest, over 4,500 blocks away, or about 135 kilometers in real life. Normally you couldn't do this because of the curvature of the Earth. Let's check it out. It's the highest point on Earth at 8,848.86 meters. And even at our reduced scale, it's higher than the vanilla max world gen at 294 blocks tall. The Himalayas are an example of fold mountains. The Indian subcontinent crashed into Asia about 55 million years ago, and it's still going. The front part of the plates are folding, and everything behind them keeps pushing. Which means the Himalayas and Everest are still growing. About 470 million years ago, long before it started getting pushed up, the peak of Mount Everest was being formed in a shallow marine environment. The highest rocks on the planet are marine limestones. Our Minecraft mountains easily fit on top of a glacier down there. Which is also something pretty cool about this map. You can actually make out different glaciers and how they all merge together, and you can still see how they flow down the mountains. It's really neat. So even though Everest is the tallest peak on Earth, there is another mountain that could be considered higher, and I'm not talking about Chimborazo. We talked about prominence and thinking about it as lowering a waterline. Well, now I'm at the bottom of the ocean, and there is a mountain that starts here, about 5,000 meters below the surface. I was only able to find 100-meter resolution bathymetric data, so our scale here is adjusted again. Now, one block equals 100 meters. So I would be about as tall as the Space Needle in Seattle. If you started counting elevation from here, Mauna Kea is the world's tallest mountain at 9,330 meters, but only 4,207 meters of that is above the surface. If Mount Everest started at the same location, it would be about 480 meters shorter, or 5 blocks. This is the big island of Hawaii, and all of the islands are a different type of volcano, a shield volcano, and they are all made of basalt. The lava that forms these islands is mafic, so it has less silicon and more iron, and this causes it to have a much lower viscosity than the felsic lavas that make up stratovolcanoes. This causes the islands to be wide and flat instead of tall. We have covered the biggest mountains on Earth, but why stop there? The biggest mountain in the solar system is on Mars. Olympus Mons is also a shield volcano, and is made of basalt. Even though we think of Mars as the red planet, it's actually more rusty. Like we talked about, basalt has more iron, and when it weathers, it can become an orange color. I'm currently standing in the caldera, which is half the size of the big island of Hawaii. The lowest point in the caldera here is still more than twice the height of Mount Everest. The highest peak here is a staggering 21.9 kilometers tall. The entire volcano is about 300,000 square kilometers, which is about the same size as the entire state of Arizona, or 56,000 kilometers larger than the United Kingdom. Because it is so wide, it's really difficult to see its true size. So I want to mess with scale one more time and try to see it up close. Okay, so I made a model of it as a display entity, and in this model, each block equals 2,000 meters. And at this scale, the model would only be 12 blocks tall, but I made the actual model 120 blocks tall and then compressed it, so we have a little bit more of a smooth appearance. I also shaded it a bit like a DEM, where it goes from black to white, because it was really hard to make out just as a single block. It also just seems incredibly flat like this, but one of the benefits of having it as a display entity is that I can actually adjust the scale. So here it is with the elevation exaggerated 5 times normal. Kind of feels like cheating, but at least you can tell it's a mountain now. I almost forgot to put our Minecraft mountain here as a reference. Not that you would really miss it. It's right there. 1 block is still 1 meter for that little model. So here's the strange thing. We started with Rib Mountain, which doesn't look like much of a mountain, and we ended up at Olympus Mons, which I might say the same thing. Thinking about the definition again, the rising more or less abruptly is a bit of a stretch here. In QGIS, we can actually calculate the slope based on the elevations in the DEM. The bright colors are steeper slopes, but most of the mountain is close to a 4-degree incline. If you were walking up this slope, you would barely notice it. I'm not advocating for Olympus Mons to not be a mountain, but it does highlight something that I didn't talk about in detail, and that's slope. The Minecraft mountains are incredibly steep compared to real life, but they kind of need it to pull off looking like impressive mountains while still reasonably fitting into the game world. And there you go, that's all I got. This was going to be a quick video that I wanted to get out before leaving for Australia, and I just ran out of time. If you want to know what I did down under, there's a video on the channel already called Australian Salt from a couple years ago, and it's still the same project that I talked about in that video. For patrons, I recently released an hour-long video of me talking about the geology and other cool things that I came across this year. I hope you enjoyed this little weird video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Oh, and if anyone's still here, what do you think of the opening animation? I'm trying to find the right sound to go with it. I'm definitely not high energy, so I think I need something a bit subdued. But if you have ideas, let me know. Thanks to Icaro for making it, and Dingy for giving me a bunch of things to try.